Seth, there is someone on the top left quadrant, and it looks like a female. Can you explain?
Who the hell is this person? I don't know. Did you get the wrong Zoom number here?
Who are you?
I don't. Who is this intruder, Seth? But I
No,
gotta say, I am so happy to see a non-male dude in this little forum.
that's
Who is this,
true.
Seth?
So this is my good friend Era Minta, who goes by Minta. This is her official introduction to the podcast. But I must say, not her first contribution, as she is a frequent listener, a rare one, I think. And she's very thoughtful about actually when we say, hey, give us ideas for topics or whatever. She submits them and they're often far more thoughtful than the ones we come up with. So we thought it was more than due time to bring her on and let her join a little bit of the fun here. So welcome to the pod, Minta. How you doing?
Thank you. I am so excited. I am just a small amount nervous. This is the first podcast slash visual podcast I have ever been a part of. So wish me luck, and I potentially apologize in advance.
I feel fully
Minta.
confident that you're going to be far more additive than you are subtractive. And I will also say that aside from just being my friend, Mint is also a huge music fan and has very good taste. So in that way, we are brothers in arms, and that's why I feel very good about bringing her on today. So yeah.
Awesome. I'm
That's right.
excited.
And I wanted to say, Minta, the last time we all saw each other was that amazing epic night at Dead and Co.
It
in
was epic.
Wrigleyville.
That's a good word.
She
Welcome.
remembers the pre-concert a lot, definitely. The concert, less so.
Hey,
But
you
Yeah,
did it
we'll
right.
uh, we'll we'll have a redo this upcoming June.
absolutely.
Well,
Looking forward to
welcome,
it.
Minta.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Seth, you're the man of the hour here, the Mike Commander. We're talking about D-Side Decides. And Minta, you being a lifelong fan of D-Side stories, this is our opportunity just to throw questions. Seth's going to throw out some topics, and we're just going to with whatever the heck is on our mind. So, Seth, take it away, buddy.
Cool. Happy to have it. So, for those who haven't listened to this one before, we've got a bunch of rapid fire topics. Some of these are a little less rapid fire, but we just give an opportunity to kind of do a roundtable and have people share either their opinions or their stories. But rather than a fully structured episode around one topic, we're just going to kind of fire them off. So, we may not all have thoughts for all of these, but we're going to try to tag team our way through, and it should be fun. So, without further ado, I actually wanted to start with a personal one. For each of you,
Oh,
I'd be curious to hear your craziest personal music story. So whether it was a concert experience or just whatever it may be, do you have something on your mind that was just like a crazy thing where someone said like that's wild. What do you got?
well, ladies first, Minta.
I get well. So I the first thing that comes to mind is about a decade ago, a little over a decade ago, I was in college, and I used to dabble in creative ways to make money. Um, get your mind out of the gutter. I um,
Seth.
I went to school in Boston, and I did a little bit of purveying of certain plants on the side. And one of my customers was these group of four guys, and they lived in Cambridge, right across the river, in Boston. And I was doing a delivery there one day, and they were like, "Hey, you should come to our show tonight." And I was like, "Who are you?" I just knew them as these four guys, and I was like, "Who are you? What are you guys doing?" And it turns out that I was selling weed to Passion Pit, and
That's
and I
incredible.
and I didn't actually know it at the time. And apparently, they they blew up, and they were very big in 2009, 2010.
And you gave them all of their inspiration, I would say.
That it
Yeah.
100%, that was me. So that was pretty wild at the time when I realized what was going on. That was pretty fun. So it's like music related, but music adjacent.
That's
Well,
exactly what I had in mind. That's great.
and the obvious question is, did you become their continued supplier? Was it a very profitable relationship? Because
It
you could
was.
overcharge them now, you
Oh my
know.
God, no, I was like way too naive at the time. I think I would like cut them a discount when they like definitely didn't
Oh,
need a discount. No, we were buds for about a year, so that was pretty cool.
Very cool. No pun intended. Wait, maybe so.
Thank you.
I love it. What a great way to start.
All right, Scott, what do you have?
Oh my gosh. Well, I would say this actually relates to our old job here, Seth. Minta, as you know, Seth and I worked together way in the past, even before Mesh and Bone, in the glorious world of pens. And at the time, and this is actually pre-Seth, we found a guy from Rainbow Park called Kanye West. And I had tried to get, okay, I know this is a horrible thing to say. I had tried to get R. Kelly to do a like a benefit show for Papermate pens, right, in Chicago. He was a local hero at the time. He was unavailable, which was probably a good thing. And we got Kanye. And so I got to hang and meet Kanye, and we hired him, and he was just like kind of an up and comer. And then I was flying to France when I lived there, and he sat right by me in Air France, right? And I wasn't high rolling it. It was business class, right? But and I was like, hey man, I hired you like 5 years ago. I'm the pen guy. And that was
He's like, get away from me.
Dude, he turned off the lights and was just like, yeah, I'm going to sleep. And that was his way of thanking me. So Kanye, you owe me a big one, man. I got you in the game.
Yeah. And down on his left these days, it seems.
Yeah.
He's certainly not flying commercial anymore, though.
Exactly, man. Yeah. So
Cool.
that's my story.
Cool. I'll do mine. Funny enough, I'll do a mini version so we can keep it rolling. I actually have another Passion Pit related story. My old upstairs neighbor in Chicago was the drum tech for Passion Pit. And so he'd be, for 2 months at a time, the best possible upstairs neighbor because he'd be gone. And then he'd come home from like a tour in Australia with nothing to do and would just party all night. And like they would paint, and their paint would like drip through the floor onto our apartment. We had a dicey relationship, but it's just funny that we both have like Passion Pit run-ins, although yours is much funnier.
And yours was like best neighbor to worst neighbor.
Exactly. It was not ideal when he was home, and I knew immediately when he came back. So that's unfortunate. But here's one. I want a couple. We have so many positive ones. I want to kind of have one that's funny / negative.
Bring on the dark.
What would you say is from the 60s till today, what would you consider to be the worst decade for music? And don't just say like this decade. I guess you could.
See, that's and your answer. What I was going to say. You knew that's what I would say. Is like music today. Like there's nothing. Okay, it's like a broad sweeping statement to say nothing is good, but like everything now, and you could say this about all music, I guess, but everything now is a ripoff of something 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And I think that's just like the old soul in me, is I'm just disappointed for the most part in like this decade. But I also never gravitate towards this decade. So that would go to the bottom of my list.
I think it's possible too that we're just a little bit like, once you hit a certain age, I'll call it 30, and I am past that, where like you stop, like contemporary music, pop music stops resonating with you a little bit, and you just listen to less. You kind of fall into what you know and you like it. So it is a cop-out answer for sure, but it's definitely an acceptable answer.
But here, let me explain just a tiny bit more. I was, it's January, beginning of the year. Also, a very happy belated birthday to my good buddy Seth.
Oh,
thank you.
This guy, big three right there. Yeah, let's throw it in.
January, there's everything like a recap of the year before, and so I was reading a Billboard list of the best songs of 2022, and out of 100 songs, I recognized like one artist.
Yeah. So, we're out of the game. We're out of the game at this point.
Well, but let me ask you a question, because so many of us, we reach that age where you don't listen to new music. But what in there, Minta, did you like? What in this horrible decade was there something that you're like, okay, I hated most of it, but that was a shining star?
Specifically from this decade, or like this past,
or in the worst decade that you said maybe it's now?
In the worst decade. Well, I discovered definitely some of my favorite artists in this past decade, and I think a large part of that is actually attributed to Seth. Our music tastes have become so intertwined, but like Wolfpack and Scary Pockets and Corey Wong and Theo Katzman, and like those guys are like really, I think, coming into their own in the past year, 2 years, 5 years. But again, their sound is not like that kind of overproduced synthy new sound. It harkens back to an older sound, and I think that's what I'm attracted to.
And I think a lot of two things I'll say that what you said made me think of. number one, I think a lot of what resonates with us is music that sounds a little bit out of time. Like it's whether it's more folky or whatever. And it's also just like we've settled into these subgenres of like, I may not like what they're playing on the radio, but there's a lot of good new music coming out. It's just in this little like sub lane that is popular in random Spotify channels. And it's bands that would still sell out 1,000-seat places here in Chicago, but you're not hearing them in CVS, right? So I think it's maybe just this compartmentalization of music that's happening, and we stay in our compartments more than we used to. That's what
Unfortunately, CVS bangers do not top our list, but
I do love a good CVS banger. I'm not gonna lie. Scott, what would you say is yours if you had to pick
well, I may
one?
go against the grain here, but for me, and I'm a born in the 70s, kind of child of the 80s, I would say the latter half of the 80s I didn't like. Okay, now let me take you back, or let me set the scene here. On the radio was all hair metal. Okay, and now there was some good hair metal bands, but most of them, it was insanely formulaic. This is when MTV was literally just pumping out. This is right before grunge. And to me, it was a lot of boy bands. It was even hip hop was kind of in this pre Dr. Dre, but right after Run DMC. And I just didn't really resonate with any of that music, probably from 86 to 90. And I think that's why one of my favorite decades is the 90s, because that's when my first year in college, that's when Dr. Dre launched The Chronic. That's when Nirvana was Nevermind, and U2 with Octune Baby. Even in the U2 phase, like Rattle and Hum in that late 80s, I didn't like it. There was just something, I think it was just ready, like kind of this double helix, like it was kind of declining and they're looking for something new. So maybe that was a bad answer, Seth. It was half.
No, that's
half
a good answer. And it sort of explains kind of the throughway between two time frames that you did like. For me, I will say the latter half of the 90s, I think, which is funny because I actually like that was a very formative time for me in terms of how old I was and learning about music. But I'm looking at it from a backward facing lens and like, what do I listen to now and what do I not? Stuff from the 60s, 70s, 80s, I still is a huge part of my listening diet, and the newer stuff I dig too. But that there's like from like in there, of course, there are standouts because like there was more to the 90s than Nirvana, right? Like they're good bands from the 90s, but by and large, that's just not a decade I find myself going back to. And I don't know if it's kind of a lot of the superficial poppy stuff that was happening in the late 90s, like a lot of the boy band stuff, but I just don't get psyched on 90s jams the way that I feel like a lot of people tend to that are my age, like 90s party, I'm like not into it. So that's what I'm going with. Nope, I'm out.
I get it though, because like you said, Scott, like the first half of the 90s, in my opinion, best time for hip hop, because that's Tupac, Biggie, NWA.
Oh, for
and those
sure.
are like three formative to me. And then they all transitioned into like Genuine, and that's where
much more like R&B focused.
Yeah,
hip-hop,
like
right?
Boyz II Men, good, but like I'm out. Like out of a full album, two good songs. Whereas like Biggie, Tupac, no skippers.
You won't get a fight from me, but some people would literally fight you over that. So I won't.
Don't show them this episode.
And I think Seth, you and Minta, as we looked, I think Seth, you and I even talked about it. There's almost these cyclical, like music will have this really creative phase, then it hits this kind of professional, almost mass market, formulaic, and then it kind of resets again. So I think, we kind of identified probably these kind of where the business takes over, and it kind of
we've done it. We did it.
There, we just analyzed it. All 4 decades.
Everything. Yeah. Well done, guys. Well done. All right. Here's one for you, which if you don't have an answer, that's fine. But I thought this was fun. The best band you can't believe doesn't speak English as their first language. So there's been a few along the way that I have found out later they weren't American, and it like totally spun my head around, or not even American, but just like not English speakers. And you're like, how can that be? But Minta, I'll let you go first. You put your hand up.
ABBA.
Yeah, great call.
Oh, that is a great one.
Immediately,
I didn't even think of that one.
Because they're on. What's up? What were you saying?
I was going to say, and famously, like the main the two guys were pretty good English speakers, but the two women like really weren't, and they would write the lyrics for them phonetically so they could sing them, and you'd
Yeah.
never know it hearing them perform it
Yeah.
that they were not American. That's a great
It's
call.
hilarious. They had no idea what they were saying. Well, for the most part, give or
Yeah.
take. But like, that's the first one who I thought of. Again, heavy rotation right
Yeah.
now, something I probably wouldn't have listened to 20 years ago. And then you're like, oh yeah, what does Sweden have? IKEA and ABBA. Like that's it.
They're back in a big way. Yeah, they do seem to be having a bit of a renaissance with people our age who didn't
Totally.
necessarily encounter them when they were new, but for whatever reason, they're having like a, I don't want to say a moment, but they seem to have more resonance now than they did like 10 years ago, which is super
Really?
They're having a moment because roller skates are coming back into fashion. Roller skates made it big in the
Are you
pandemic.
kidding me?
Roller
Oh,
skates made it big again, 20, 30 years later. Roller skates and ABBA.
no
What's old is
way.
new again.
Are you kidding? Okay. Like I got to get into this. I
You
want to,
need some
Minta,
roller
we're going to
skates.
talk. I want to get into this scene. All right. Like I was there when ABBA came out. And then there was this whole Mamma Mia. I don't know if you remember this play.
That's
It
true.
was big on Broadway. They had a little resurgence, but the roller skating,
That's what
They
it
all
takes.
go together.
I'm going.
We gotta get
I'm
you.
going.
We gotta get you some Blade Scout. We got to do it.
Yeah.
I would pay to see it happen. Mine would be the one I thought of, and that made me think the question is Phoenix. I saw them maybe 3 months ago or so, and seeing them live, like the thing that struck me is they perform. I knew they were French, but I saw them live. You never know anything, and then like between songs, sometimes Ben's like, "Hey, we're happy to be here." They like couldn't even string a sentence together. It was like it was crazy. So they're another one that probably learned those songs phonetically because their regular English is like non-existent, which blew my mind. So
Incredible.
do you have any, Scott? I have one in mind I thought you might say, but
Ooh, let me think here. Okay, here's one I'm not a big fan of, but one that I couldn't believe was not from America when I first heard was the Scorpions. Okay,
that's what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah,
that was going to be my guess.
This
Yes.
is Klaus Meine on lead guitar. Is that my German accent? And I heard it, I was like, what happened to this dude's face? Like, what's going on? And then when you hear them, it's a very German kind of outlook, but the music is almost sound like middle America, like classic rock.
Mhm.
And here's okay. Now I'll tell you a genre. Can I say this, Seth and Minta? You might find this interesting. And it's Seth. Maybe you got a taste of this when you came out to Japan, but it's city pop, which is this 80s Japanese movement. Most of them, and a lot of Japanese learn English, but they never speak it. So that's kind of like how we learned Spanish in like sixth grade. And their songs are absolutely brilliant, like Japanese precision. And a lot of them just don't speak English, yet they'll include some, English lyrics in their songs. And
I was going to say
really interesting.
I was thinking about when you just said that, and what I remember about city pop is just that, where they'll be like almost all in Japanese, but you'll catch these little American phrases, which is kind of a precursor to K-pop. Like that's kind of what they do in K-pop, right?
does the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like a hook, right? It's like they got everyone in.
Give everybody something to sing along to, but don't totally sort of like give up your identity. It's actually brilliant. It's a great business move.
It really is.
Let's see here. What do I got? How about most interesting rock star parent? So I tried to find a list of both parents, like people you may not even know, like, oh, their parent is a famous whatever. A musician is cool, and I've got a couple of those. But like I even tried to find non-musicians. Sometimes you hear stories and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that's where they came from. So any thoughts on that one?
So I had a question about this one. When you say most interesting rock star parent, is it a contemporary musician, their parent, or them as a parent?
I guess it would almost work both ways. In my head, I was thinking like here's the random one that I thought of was Julian Casablancas from The Strokes. You wouldn't know his dad is like the most famous model agency head in the world or something. Like he started this really famous modeling agency. He made a lot of money, and I think his mom owns like art galleries or something. And then here's this kid who you just think of him in this vacuum of like rock musician, but actually he has these like pre-existingly kind of famous parents, which I think is so interesting when you think about the nurture piece of how they came to be who they are.
That's a great one.
That is. So the first thing that I thought of, and I think it was because my brain kind of flipped it around, I thought of like a contemporary musician as a parent. And well, he's now expired, but the first one I thought of was Bob Marley, because
Prolific.
he has so many kids
So many
that are in the music industry now. And that's kind of where my brain went. What, like 5 of his 15 kids are in the music industry, and now he's got grandkids in the music industry.
And as long as you've got Marley as your last name, some venue will book you, right? I mean, there's no.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
Or
some are
some
very good. Some have
dispensary.
done interesting stuff. But
Yeah.
it's literally what I Shot the Sheriff's about. It's like an anti-abortion song, not for like pro-choice, but it's more like, I want as many kids as possible. Do not prevent me from having more kids. It's kind of crazy.
What?
But yeah.
Hey, I
No way.
that.
Look it up.
Next week's episode, we're going into that.
We're going an entire episode on I Shot the Sheriff. Yeah. We can do it. Anything from you, Scott, or do we want to move on?
The only one I know, again, going back to Papermate, was the Nesbitt. I think he's the guy on the Monkees, one of them.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
And his mom invented liquid paper, which is like whiteout.
Yes.
Totally
That's
random.
a great one.
I'm just going to throw that in, right?
No, that is a great example. Like, not a famous person per se, but did a famous thing. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Very random.
Something
like, you know what my mom did? There you go.
Bonkers.
To all stationary fans out there. Yeah. Keep it up.
to
the one out there.
Yeah. Love it.
That's it, Seth. I don't know anyone else.
Cool. No, those are 3 great ones. So I think we fucking nailed that one. How about this one? This is, again, another one, negative spin, but it's fun to talk about. What would you say in your lifetime is your most disappointing record release? So something you were really psyched about, it came out and you were like, damn, I don't like it that much.
I can start with this because it is, I have some recency bias with this one. I don't know if you've heard of this artist. Her name is Beyonce. She's like pretty small.
They're coming for you. Be careful what you say before you say it.
I gotta Google her. I'm
coming on here with like too many hot takes. So Beyonce came out with a new record this past year, Renaissance. And it got, huge acclaim, of course, because of who she is. And I wouldn't say it's the most disappointed I've ever been. I wouldn't give that to Beyonce, but I was extremely underwhelmed. I thought the album itself was underbaked and underdeveloped. But to me, the album was like, none of the songs like stood out to me as like an all-time anthem or a banger. And I was like, this feels like sitcom filler music, not in the style, but in the fact of like, it's just there. It's just, it is what it is. And like all the songs kind of sounded the same. So
it's ubiquitous, but it's not memorable, right? Especially with her, it's going to be everywhere.
That's a big letdown.
Sad. And again,
that's a letdown.
Bayhive, don't come for me.
Don't come for me.
No,
I don't think many of them listen to this podcast, luckily. So we're pretty light on Beyonce content generally. So they probably don't tune in.
I know.
But, Beyonce, if you want to promote us, we're gonna love your album. Just tell you right now.
You can shit on the podcast, and we're good with it. Yeah.
Do it, whatever. Just say our names.
All press is good. Yes. What about you guys?
Okay. I think I've said this before, but I was so Minta. I got like one of the first U albums. I got Boy when I was like 6 years old. I got Gloria, U2's second follow-up album, and then, October, and then I got War, and then Unforgettable Farm, which is my favorite. The biggest disappointment, and this is going to, shatter the internet, or at least the 10 people, Joshua Tree. Because what I loved that they were not American. Especially I grew up like, an hour away from Joshua Tree. And so I didn't think it was that cool. It was just a random desert for like meth heads at the time. And
for sure.
I was like, what are they doing in Joshua Tree? And they sounded American and I couldn't get over it. I love this exotic, like Ireland, castles, like wind. It was super pasty. And that to me, I was just like, it influenced the whole thing. Absolutely, don't judge a book by its cover. That one. Second one, a local band from Pasadena, Van Halen, when they came out with 5150, when they got Sammy Hagar. And that to me, it was like Van Halen used to be dangerous. And now they were like a Prius or like a Chevy Nova. It was just like bland. Like I knew it when my dad was like, oh, I really like this new version. And I was like, oh no.
I'm out.
Those were the big disappointments there. I know. I'm sorry, fans out there, and Brian Pate, our other listeners. I'm always bagging on you two, but again, only half of you two.
Speaking of
When,
Brian,
yeah.
I'll get myself. He always goofs on me for talking about the Beatles too much, but that's actually one of my answers here, or not the Beatles, but Paul
Oh,
McCartney. I was even in the bag for all the Paul solo stuff when I was growing up. I love Flaming Pie, which I think came out in '97.
yep.
And then the album after that, I think it was called Run Devil Run. And I remember being, again, as a kid, being like, I'm psyched, new Paul McCartney album coming out,
Yeah.
which is fucking nerdy, but whatever. And then I got it and I was like, I don't like any of these songs. Like, this is not, and I'm sure, no, he was late enough that at that point, anything he puts out after 1985 is kind of a victory lap. So it was weird that I liked the ones before it anyway. Off the Ground was awesome too. Ram was awesome. But that one came out and I was just like, this dude is nailing it. And it bummed me out as a 12-year-old or whatever
I was going to say 12-year-old Seth was giving it two thumbs down.
Two thumbs down on the P-Man. Sorry, bro. But
the
yeah,
king.
That's mine.
That's
what do you think? Do we have time for like one more?
Let's do one more. Come on.
Let's do one more.
Okay, cool. And then I have one at the end just for Minta. What would you say is, let's see. Actually, do we want to talk about Sam Phillips for a second? So it was recently that would have been the 100th birthday of Sam Phillips, the founder of Sun Records, which is the label that Elvis was on, among others. And just, Mint, do you want to do 30 seconds on like why he matters and kind of who he was in the history of music?
In the history of music. Super quick.
Yeah.
Super quick and dirty. So yeah, today would have been Sam Phillips' 100th birthday. And he was obviously just a titan in laying the groundwork of popular so he, like you said, he's got Elvis, he's got Johnny Cash, he's got Roy Orbison, a personal favorite of a few of us on this podcast. But I heard this incredible story that of like how him and Elvis kind of came to meet. So, both Memphis natives. So like the back door of Sam Phillips's studio was open and it was in its infancy. And Elvis kind of like sauntered up to the back door and he was 17 years old. And he like kind of knocked on the back open door and said, I want to record Happy Birthday for my mom. And Sam Phillips was like rushing his way out the door. So I heard this, he did an interview in 1993 and that's when he told this story. And Sam Phillips was like, there was kind of this ruffian. He looked a little shaggy. I could have said no. I could have said not today, son. But he said, that's kind of sweet. This young man wants to record Happy Birthday for his mom. And he let him in and he heard Elvis sing Happy Birthday. And he said like his world split open. And that was kind of Elvis's introduction to Sam Phillips. And I just thought that was really amazing. And, we wouldn't have him if not for that day.
And think of all the other things we wouldn't have if Elvis wasn't around. Like all the bands that you think about, they're like, I started playing music when I heard an Elvis record, whether it's, 2/3 of the bands we talk about in this podcast, pretty much. But so in addition to being big underage wife guy, Elvis, also big mom guy. Good to know.
Both ends of the spectrum once again.
Cool.
That's awesome.
So that we'll wrap things up. But Minta, you got to tell us, what's your favorite episode of D-Side Stories and your least favorite episode that you've listened to?
Oh.
And I'm more curious about the worst one.
And you don't have to list names, right? Minta, you don't have to call out names like I hate listening to you. Or
I will.
Or you could say best and worst host. That's fine too.
Yeah. Scott's needs to be fired.
Guest host. I think my favorite and my least favorite episode are one and the same.
Okay.
When I very first met Seth, coming up on 2 years now, he's like, I have a podcast. And I was like, that's lame. Turns out it's not. It's very cool. And here we are. But he sent me a snippet of like the very first D-Side Stories episode. And I was like, this is not good. And then I was like, which one are you? I can't differentiate your voice. And I thought it was not good because it wasn't, it wasn't tight, it wasn't put together, but obviously it was your guys' first foray into this together. But it was also my favorite because it was kind of laying the groundwork for what would become. And now I am a huge D-side fan. I listen nearly every week, every time you guys put one out. And I think it's just such a great thing. And I always learn something every single time. And I always love to get a tiny little shout out. So it's very fun.
Love it. That was I have it. I'm welling up over here. I have a tear in my
Yeah,
eye.
I mean,
circle.
I
Little
I
did
gotta
you know you'd appear on it someday.
I gotta tell you, Minta, your story about Elvis, like the way you said is beautiful. I'm just kind of like, hey, you need to have the Minta cast. Like what's going on here, Minta? Like, and I want to tell our audience here, when I first met Minta, Seth had told me a lot about her, and a lot about just your music background and how you just love music. And so obviously we met a couple times, but even being at the Dead and Co, I just was so excited to see how you knew so much about the scene, and how you just straddle all these different generations of music. And I wanted to ask one question, if I could squeeze one in here, Seth, if you don't mind. Well, I'm just going to do it anyways. Minta, what song or what album, when you first heard it, that just got you hooked into music?
Great question. And once again, we've come full circle. We're now like 7 Venn diagrams in. The song that got me before I realized it was getting me was Casey Jones by the Grateful Dead. And I was probably 4 when I heard it for the first time, maybe even younger. And I was singing along, and I was singing about cocaine, and I was like this tiny little kid. I had no idea what I was saying. But my dad was a huge Deadhead. So it was like Wheels on the Bus with mom and Grateful Dead with dad. And I grew up listening to it, not even knowing what it was. And then it just permeates your brain when you're that young.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of fall off of it in your teenage years when you're discovering whatever else you're discovering. And then again, in the past 10 years, it's like seeped back into my everyday. And it's, perhaps Grateful Dead is probably my favorite group of all time. And I didn't wear tie-dye today, just to say that.
It was all a setup. It's all a pitch.
Oh,
yeah.
No, I didn't know it. I just.
Yeah. So that, I would say, that's like what first comes to mind for sure. Yeah.
Very cool.
That's awesome. And you just radiate the spirit of the Grateful Dead, which is just peace and harmony. And I got to just say, every time Seth mentions your name, I just smile, because I'm just like, oh, when he's like, Minta's coming on, I just got really excited. So,
yeah. I'm so
thanks,
happy
Minta.
to be a part of it. Yes. Thank you guys.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Me. It's awesome.
Ooh, awesome.
Good deal.
Well, thank you. And Seth, thanks for organizing this. This is fantastic.
Of course. And thank you to Grateful Dad for inspiring me to
Grateful Dad.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Shout out.
Well, listen, everyone, thank you so much. And again, if there's anyone out there, feel free to write. We want to hear what you think about Minta, right? So Minta, now you're part of it. You're going to get all the comments, riding that train, high on cocaine. We want to hear everything. So please, everyone, give us a shout out. Again, we want to say thanks to Minta, and we'll see you guys next week.
Have a good week. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.